So your view of immigration, and we'll get to the specifics about your views on immigration, are they not affected at all by the fact that if it wasn't for immigration, you wouldn't exist as an American?
Well, I would certainly exist, but like you said, maybe not as an American. Certainly that's influenced in some measure. But I think that the kind of immigration that we had for a long time in the country, it's different than the immigration that we have now. And let's just say for openers, it's different immigrants. They're coming from a different place with a different culture, a different religion.
Different culture, different religion. I mean, different in what sense? The immigrants before, were they not different culture, different religion? Catholicism is a different culture and a different religion. So what is he talking about? I mean, the fact that you're European or your parents were from Europe or you immigrate from Europe doesn't mean you're an American. You thought that was already established. Founders were almost exclusively all Protestants. And of the 56 delegates who signed the Declaration of Independence, 55 of them were Protestants and one of them was Catholic. So yeah, there's a difference in culture there and in religion. So really say these are, the same, people. I mean, if they were the same, there wouldn't have been a revolutionary war in the first place or a Protestant Reformation in the first place. So yeah, Nick is confused. He really doesn't understand, the history of America.
It's not the same as it was. So first, you have a qualitative difference. My ancestors, for the most part, I have 3 European grandparents from Ireland and Italy, 1 from Mexico. They came from Europe. They came from a society where there's a common ancestry, there's a common religion, common civilization. The people...
No, it's not common. Yeah, Nick is confused there. So you need to really understand the history for you to really know, why America came out of, Europe. So, I mean, Nick is glossing over the fact that there are differences in, there could be differences among white people. He thinks white people are the same just because they are white. I mean, go look at the history of Europe. Almost all of it was each of them fighting each other. So yeah, these differences exist, and in Europe there was quite a lot of different, people, even then. So yeah, they just don't, it doesn't mean that you are American. American was a specific set of Caucasians versus specific set of Europeans, and those were specifically Protestants. So Protestants were the people who created America. So if you're not Protestants originally, you're not really, part of the, the founding, culture. So the culture of America is built on Protestant Christianity. And for people that think it's the same with Catholicism, yeah, you just need to look at the Protestant Reformation. That is it. If they were the same, there wouldn't need to be Protestant Reformation. So Nick is confused there.
That have come in since 65, since Hart-Celler, they're coming from China, India, the Northern Triangle, Mexico, Venezuela. And so first, they're just different people. Secondly, it's a quantitative difference. There's way more, and it's an unceasing, always increasing wave. For the first 3 or 4 waves of immigration, you would have a major influx of immigrants, and then it would stop. And then you'd have another wave, and then it would stop. This one, it just keeps going up for 35 years. And it's too many. So
yeah, he's right. You need to pause, and before you take more, you can't just keep taking constantly.
That's really where I would draw the distinction between maybe where I originate from. I would even just simply call that immigration. What this is an invasion. It's a completely different policy.
But you mentioned,
can't even call it the same thing.
But you mentioned Mexico in that list, and your father is half Mexican. So
yeah.
I mean, by your criteria, part of the invasion would include your father, presumably, and his immediate descendants who came from Mexico.
Not really true, because when my father's ancestors came here, it was a small fraction of the total immigrants that came from Mexico. I don't believe that we should have zero immigrants forever, or even zero immigrants from non-white countries. But you have to draw the distinction. My father's father, he was here in the 40s and 50s. It was his parents, or I believe either his parents or grandparents, that came here even earlier. Up until 1965, 90% of the immigrants were coming from Europe. I have no problem with that. If we have 10% of them coming from Mexico or Latin America, maybe that's reasonable, but that's not what it is now. Now you've got 10 million illegals in 4 years under Joe Biden.
Yeah, of course, he doesn't have a problem with immigrants coming from his, should I say, continent of ancestry.
And you got millions more legal immigrants from China, India, Venezuela, El Salvador. And it's so many with no break for assimilation. And they're all from non-white countries. It's transformed.
Yeah, so he's right that there needs to be assimilation. You can't just import people that have different ideas, whether it be from China or from, any European country. But still, the fact that you're from Europe doesn't automatically make you an American. It doesn't work that way. Yes, I mean, it never actually worked that way. Again, that was why there was a Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War was white people fighting other white people. For Nick, it's some white men fighting other white men. So if you were the same, why do you have to have a bloody war? Why do you have to kill each other? You see, that's when Nick's brain is, just off, So they are not the same. That's why they have to go to war. War is the, epitome of difference in culture. That is it. So they were both white, but they went to war. It means they were different culture. So the fact that you're from Europe doesn't necessarily mean you're American. You could very easily be non-American.
What America is. And again, that's the distinction. That's what makes it unacceptable. The older generations of Black people were very respectful, very humble, very decent. In fact, my grandma used to have an anecdote. She grew up in a lot of dysfunction. Her mother was mentally ill, and they would be having dinner in the projects, and there'd be so much chaos and dysfunction and disagreement and fighting. And she would look across the way out the window at a Black family in the other apartment, and they'd be holding hands around the table saying grace. And this is sort of the culture that used to prevail. But now what you have in the city is that there's no accountability for the Black people. And now Chicago has become a complete dump because these teenagers go out and they take over the city. They call them teen takeovers. That's the euphemism for it. They're teenagers, but they all come from the same neighborhood. They drive up there and they mug people and attack people, and they destroy cars and destroy shops.
So the unfortunate truth is that Nick is right here. Yes, this does happen in the Black communities, and again, that is one of the reasons Nick Fuentes is popular, because there's an element of truth to what he says. Aside his ignorance of basic history and facts, he says a lot of things that are true, and maybe his explanation for those things and his solution may not be grounded in in any reasonable or should I say logical inference, but he's right about a lot of these things. Yes, Black neighborhoods are riddled with crime and just sheer degeneracy. And the thing is that many people like to pretend it doesn't happen, and that is where you kind of lose the argument, and and you lose a lot of people because people see it. I mean, you just can't tell them it's not there, but they can see it, right? You can see it, they can see it. It's happening. It's not like it's a fairy tale. It's happening. So why are you telling them it's not happening? So Nick is telling them, yes, it's happening, and it's happening like this, and this is bad, and we have to stop pretending like it's not. So I think that's where Piers Morgan is, kind of lost. Piers Morgan is like, but that's racist and all of that. If it's a fact, it doesn't matter, really. It happens. So it doesn't matter how you interpret it. Like, is this or is that, is racist or is, it happened. So deal with it. Do something about it. I think that's Nick's message there.
I want to come to something else you said. This is where you talk about Jews, women, and blacks. Let's just take a listen.
They're always coming up with, no, it's not the Jews. No, it's not women. No, it's not blacks. It's actually really complicated. No, it fucking isn't at all. Jews are running society. Women need to shut the fuck up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
No. So, yeah, we already had that, Nick. Yeah, 1776, I think, is a Revolutionary War time. Jews were not controlling society. Women were not allowed to vote, and blacks were slaves for the most part. Well, yeah, why? That was not a utopia, was it? We had war, right? I mean, that was the Revolutionary War. All the criteria you said were there, but we still had war. Why? So you see, this is where Nick's arguments just falls apart. It's not a matter of these things, that he said. You have to also consider the other part of the problem, which has white skin, which is white people. So there are good white people and there are bad white people. So if you go back to the Revolutionary War, you may want to side with one of them because you will side with the founders who were fighting for freedom from oppression from other white people, or will you side with the oppressors? They were both white men. All the things Nick said were there, but that was no utopia. America had to fight. So who were these other white people? That is where Nick just crumbles. Who were they? And why is Nick not part of them? Yeah, why is Nick not part of the other white people Americans had to kill to create, a great nation, America? So, yeah, so it doesn't work that way, Nick.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what you meant there?
That's all true. That's 100% true.
That's 100% false. In fact, we also had the same situation, the same scenario during the Civil War. Jews were not running society, women were not voting, and black people, for the most part, were slaves. But we had perhaps America's most bloody conflict in history, the American Civil War. That was no utopia. There was still a problem. We took away those three problems, Nick said, but there was still a bigger problem. And what was that problem? White people. Yes. Yes. The people who fought for America killed other white people, Confederates. So who were these other white people? And that's where Nick just, gets lost. And, Nick does say a lot of things that are true. And, but if you go deep, you know what they say? The devil is in the details. If you go deep, you see that he's actually at the roots, he's lost. He understands, all these things that are happening in real time, but he has no clue of the history, where or how to solve it, how to solve the problem, or the root cause of the problem, because if you look at it, there's a lot of blame to be put on white people. That is how it has always been. And if you take out black people today, if you take out all people of color, it's not going to change. America is still likely going to end up in a civil war at some point because of these other white people. So in the Civil War time, it was Democrats. The Revolutionary War, it was, Imperial Britain, and those who, stood for imperialism. And now it's likely white liberals or white leftists.